Dr. Levinson, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it. So at what point in 2017 did you look at this process that you had entered as a whistleblower and it sort of blows up in Washington? Did you think, hey, wait a second, I want to be the person making some of these decisions on Capitol Hill?
Well, I got to the point where I could do no more getting things accomplished for our veterans, and I decided that this would be a good step to do. Give me a louder voice, so to speak, touch base with the people of New Hampshire, and I try to succeed where at the VA things just weren't moving rapidly enough for anyone's liking.
If Republicans are kicking the tires on Dr. Levinson, what kind of conservative are they going to get? A Tea Party, Liberty kind of conservative, or establishment moderate? Where do you fall on that spectrum?
I'm the political outsider, and as I once mentioned, I eschew labels. I'm a solid fiscal conservative. Again, I'm the non-politician. I'm a physician first and foremost. I'll always be a physician first and foremost. And as I've listened to patients, I'll listen to the constituents.
As you diagnose, what is the biggest problem facing those constituents in CD2?
There are a lot of problems right now. The opioid crisis is looming, health care, it's just veteran services. There are a lot of problems that need to be addressed.
If you reach Capitol Hill, would you see yourself as a loyal Republican in line with President Trump, or more of an independent voice?
Well, I've always been independent. I was an early supporter of President Trump, but anyone thinks I blindly follow the president should go talk to his VA secretary, who might give you another opinion.
The Russia investigation, is this a legitimate line of inquiry or a witch hunt, as a lot of Republicans believe?
Well, I don't know all that much about it. I only know what I hear in the news. It's not something that takes up a great deal of my attention. To me, it has the appearances of a witch hunt. It started immediately after the election, so it seemed to me as an opposition move to try to get the attention away from the president's agenda.
Immigration is always a top issue in CD2. A lot of people care about that in the western through the northern parts of the state. Should a deal on DACA, the deferred action for childhood arrivals, those recipients, the non-citizen children of non-citizens, stay in this country, should they be allowed to stay here?
Well, I particularly like the way the president is tying it to border security. I believe by tying the two together, you'll get a comprehensive package that will result in getting the things that the president has been wanting to get, while giving the Democrats issues which are very near and dear to their supporters.
Do you believe that a wall should be built on the southern border?
Yes, I'm a supporter of the wall. I mean, from everything from immigration to opioid interdiction, I believe the wall is a necessity.
What should Congress be doing about the mass shootings that we're seeing every few months here in this country? And certainly there's perhaps a medical aspect to this with the mental health issue, but what kind of action should Congress be taking?
Well, I think improvement of mental health services. The last tragic shooting was poor record keeping by the Department of Defense in sending it to the National Data Bank. I'm not even sure a new law is necessary. I just think that these agencies have to do their job.
Anything on firearms?
On firearms?
In terms of that fix, is there anything in there, the bump stocks? Some people have proposed a ban based on what happened in Las Vegas. Should any action be taken in terms of firearms?
Well, as you may know, I'm a firearms instructor, and as a part-time avocation, I have no like of bump stocks. I don't see any utility for them. But my concern is when these laws get proposed, they try to dig a lot deeper to placate the gun control crowd. So it's hard to get an honest law through. And I'm not sure that one could be gotten through that would ban bump stocks without hurting other areas of legitimate firearms enthusiasts.
Circling back to the VA, reforming that part of the federal government has proven very difficult. I mean, you've seen from the inside some of the difficulties. What would you do as a congressman to ensure that some of those reforms actually get done and that they stick? And,
well, the first is leadership. you have to have solid leadership throughout the VA, and as you've seen locally, I had problems with local leadership and leadership in the network. And everyone knows that. There was Congressman Bergman at the field hearing we had in Manchester. His conclusion at the end was leadership was severely lacking, but a lot of these people are still in place. It's a good start to try to reform how leadership is kept in place or removed, but so far I haven't seen any teeth in it, and I haven't seen the ability to get rid of bad leaders. The ones that were removed from Manchester, one was allowed to retire, and the other two are still floating around the system drawing their pay.
Why is that? Why are they allowed to just move somewhere else where they may perpetuate the same problems they caused certainly here and elsewhere? That's
a very good question, and I think that's one that the VA in Washington needs to answer. Why aren't these people held accountable? I mean, the purpose of my candidacy is to hold government accountable. It's not just my concerns about the VA. Government needs to be held accountable to the people.
Speaking of government accountability, we've seen an effort right now. The administration wants to open up seacoastal areas to drilling. CD2 doesn't really touch the seacoast, but this is a small state and there are interests there. Should drilling be allowed off the coast of New Hampshire if someone wanted to do it?
Well, I think an energy policy needs to be nimble. So by having the possibility of drilling, it would help to buffer oil prices just on the perception, because drilling doesn't happen overnight. It takes years from the time the permits are given until the drilling starts. So we need ways of having a comprehensive energy policy that addresses all areas of energy concern. We're not getting away from oil anytime soon. So yes, I believe that if you can do it cleanly and in an environmentally responsible manner, we should have the option of extracting the oil. I am in favor of renewable energy sources, that we need to expand our energy repertoire, so to speak. We need to be able to use energy locally. New Hampshire is a net energy electricity exporter, for example. The outdated era of a nationwide power grid needs to be changed. We need to change our thinking and how we approach energy going forward.
You mentioned that you're a sportsman. You've no doubt spent time hunting in the North Country. What should a member of Congress in the 2nd District be doing that Congresswoman Custer is not doing to try and help the North Country's economy?
The North Country's economy is a big challenge. There's issues with roadways. I've been up there not only as a hunter, but during this last hunting season I went and talked to the people up there, Democrats and Republicans alike, and I heard some of the problems. There are transport issues. There are communications issues. In this day of telecommuting, you'd think you'd be able to have more firms up there that can work virtually, but there are issues with both transport and with telecommunications.
All right, Dr. Stuart Levinson, it's good to get to know you a little bit better here on Close Up, and we'll see you back and definitely see you out there on the campaign trail.
Oh, I look forward to it. I hope people can look at me, see my website, levinsonforcongress.com, and it's a pleasure, and congratulations on your promotion.
Much appreciated. Thank you, Doctor.